Hello, today I will share the secret weapon of Canadian oil. I will show in detail how companies could utilize this weapon and how it really works. So, majority of the production in Canadian oil is coming from two kind of major recovery scheme. The first one is oil sands mining. This will be about 1.7 million barrels a day. And the other one is another 1.7 million barrels a day is thermal processes. So processes they call like SAGD, steam assisted gravity drainage. So SAGD, and those processes recover oil that can't be basically mined because it's too deep to mine, and it really relies on steam injection rate underground to transfer the heat to the oil so it can be drained by gravity. So here's an old pattern, and I will kind of use it the schematic as an illustration of this concept. So what we have here, and remember, close to 1.7 million barrels is produced that way in Canada, out of the 5 million that we produce as 5% of global oil production. But long story short, we have an injector here that will inject steam, and that steam will come from surface and will be injected into the reservoir. And here we have production well. So production well where the oil is drained by gravity towards the producer, but also the steam that just condensed, which is known as water, obviously, becomes part of that emulsion and produced to surface. And so um, the secret weapon that I'm alluding to is kind of the concept of utilization of the electric submersible pump, which is located here, and the ability to slow down basically the production or the pump speed and start storing that emulsion on top of the producer in situ, right? And now the key question is how much of that oil could be stored, because obviously you don't really want to flood the injector. The distance here will be about 5 meters, and we can calculate kind of the using triangular prism, calculate that volume of how much could be exactly stored in the reservoir. So we can use the following illustration to uh, to really come up with kind of like a estimated volume that could be stored. And as I mentioned before, we would use the volume of a triangular prism. The equation there is volume equals base times height times length divided by 2, and the unit will be cubes, so cubic meters. And so if we draw a kind of like a triangular shape like this, and so triangular prism, I guess, and we can draw here. So we have like a 3D almost. So here the distance could be maybe like 1,000 meters, so 1,000 meters in length. So those wells are typically very long. The height of the chamber, the pay could be as high as maybe 30, 40 meters. So let's say 30 meters. But we want to store between producer and injector, and you don't necessarily want to flood the injector, but we can say maybe the key assumption here of how much maximum we can go is maybe 5 meters. And the distance here of the chamber growth could be as high as maybe 60 meters or 70 meters, depends on the chamber development kind of size and over time. But in this case, maybe we can assume it's just 10 meters for simplicity, and just say the amount of liquid that could be stored between injector and producer is about 10 meters. And so volume then will be basically the 5 meters in height times the 10 meters in that length of the not length, the width, I guess, of the steam chamber where the liquid is stored, and times the length of the walls, which is 1,000 meters, and obviously divided by 2 because it's a volumetric basically calculation for volume of the triangular prism, right? And if we kind of really look at the solution, we have about 50,000 here divided. So yeah, 50,000 divided by 2. So that will be 25,000, 25K cubes. Now, what's really important to consider is that that emulsion here is, there will be a water cut component to it, because the steam that's being injected is also condensing. So now it becomes water. And that's really the emulsion composition is really a function of your steam to oil ratio as well as the initial oil and water saturation. But for simplicity, and I guess you're going to have to believe me on that, we would say that out of the 25,000 cubes, we will have maybe 5,000 cubes of oil with water cut of maybe 80%. So 20% of that composition will be oil. And if we transfer that to barrels, we get about 30,000 barrels. So 30,000 barrels that could be stored. Now, we quickly come up with we can assume that this well could be producing maybe 1,000 barrels a day or 500 barrels a day, like half of it, right? That will be typical range. 1,000 barrels a day will be very good for, very nice homogeneous pays. But 500 could be kind of deep into the process. You can be on a decline, and now you kind of trickle down on your annual decline rate, and it could be maybe 500. Some wells could be 300, 400, but I think overall you get the idea. So if we have 30,000 barrels a day of oil stored in this section here, so 30,000 barrels of oil stored, if we produce 1,000 barrels a day, that means we can store for 30 days that oil and kind of slow down the electric submersible pump speed and store that oil for 30 days. And or if we produce at 500 barrels a day, for example, we could store for maybe 2 months, so 60 days. And I think that's what the secret weapon is for Canadian oil sands producers, is that unlike in fracking, you could slow down the pump speed, store the liquid level, and not produce it to surface. Now, if you consider that the overall production is close to 1.7 million barrels per day, so million barrels per day, and we're going to grow this possibly to maybe 2 now with the new pipelines coming online. There's an opportunity for future growth, and considering this is 80% of the overall resource from the oil sands, which is over 90% of the overall Canadian resource, majority of the growth is going to come from the SIGD processes. And so the question is, if these companies can slow down those pumps, and in price of low oil environment, price environment, can really kind of not manipulate, but adjust their kind of delay the production, and this could be very lucrative. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at some of the examples of how companies did this in the past under tough conditions. So in the following example, we're going to be looking at production plot from Conoco Oil and Gas. So Conoco Oil and Gas, you can see they basically utilize this concept of slowing down pump speed, but also slowing down steam injection rate during the commodity price curtailment here, kind of going towards 2019, and oil production rate declined accordingly. And that was by design. And obviously during COVID, we saw huge steam cut and storage of the emulsion in situ, as you can see here, but with of the oil and the water, obviously, as they were kind of co-injecting gas to maintain the bottom hole pressure. And obviously, as we look what happened afterwards, we saw kind of a flush production, stable production at 2,000 cubes a day, and then restoration of the oil production rate, which is very difficult to do in the fracking technology, at least based on this kind of intentional concept. You could literally drill the wells and kind of utilize the production for future pricing environment, in a sense, by delaying. Obviously, it's never a really good solution, optimal solution, because you're not really making money as you do it, and there's lots of challenges when it comes to water material balance and kind of energy balance and hindering steam chamber development, lots of nuances. But nevertheless, this is one of the tools in the toolbox. Example, I wanted to show an additional example is from Athabasca oil hanging stone asset. So that asset during COVID curtailment or temporary suspension was essentially shut in. You can see the steam injection rate in red basically going to zero, but also oil production rate in green also going to zero. And that was really what I was alluding to. You can literally like slow down the pump speed or turn off the pump and start storing that liquid level. And as you can see here in green, oil production later on was kind of rebooted as the pumps went back online, and then you can kind of like produce the oil. Now, you don't necessarily have to have electric submersible pump. The key idea is that the liquid level, as I was showing previously, could be stored on top of the producer, and that will be one of those like very secret important weapons, I guess, that these oil companies have, that cannot be seen anywhere else because of the nature of those businesses and how the recovery schemes are essentially operating. So hopefully this kind of concept was useful to everyone to better understand the secret weapons that SecD producers have, and kind of, comment perhaps and let me know what other kind of applications you can see this tool being utilized where you store production. This in a sense, and I think if you're thinking along the lines of kind of intentional curtailment, this is potentially a scenario where companies could do that. Obviously, they can't collide and kind of talk to each other and saying we're going to be doing it intentionally, but in a price environment of lower oil prices, companies definitely can slow down the pump speed and pump less emulsion, and therefore within that water cut, less oil to surface. Thank you so much.